Nausicaa is the daughter of King Alcinous and Queen Arete of the Phaeacians. Athena has already been moving quietly around her life before Odysseus wakes on the shore. During the night, the goddess appears to Nausicaa in a dream and encourages her to take the household clothing to the river to be washed. The suggestion sounds ordinary. A young princess should prepare for the future. Clothes should be clean. Servants should help. A wagon should be loaded. But in the Odyssey, ordinary actions often become the path through which larger events happen. By morning, Nausicaa is at the river with her attendants. They wash the clothes, spread them out to dry, eat together, and begin playing while they wait. Their voices carry across the water. The noise wakes Odysseus. He has reached Scheria with almost nothing. No ship, no crew, no weapons, no proper clothing. His body is marked by days in the sea, and he has slept beneath branches and leaves because there was nowhere else to go. When he steps out from the shelter, most of the young women run. Nausicaa does not. Athena gives her courage, but Odysseus still has to decide what to do with the opportunity in front of him. A formal suppliant might approach closely and grasp the knees of the person being asked for help. Odysseus understands that this would be a terrible choice here. He is a strange, exhausted man emerging from the bushes with almost no clothing. If he rushes toward the princess, the gesture meant to show humility could look like an attack. So he stays at a distance, and he speaks. This is one of the quieter examples of the quality that repeatedly saves him. Odysseus is not clever only when he invents traps. He watches people. He reads a room. He changes his behavior according to the danger in front of him. He praises Nausicaa without overwhelming her. He asks for help without pretending to be stronger than he is. He does not begin by announcing his rank. At this moment, being king of Ithaca matters less than convincing one young woman that he is safe enough to help. Nausicaa responds with confidence. She calls her attendants back. She reminds them that strangers and beggars are under protection of Zeus. Odysseus is given food and drink. He washes away the salt of the sea and is given clothing. For the first time in a long while, he begins to look less like wreckage left by a storm and more like a man who might enter a city. Nausicaa then explains how he should approach the palace. She does not simply walk beside him all the way. She is aware of how people talk, and what rumors might spread of the princess is seen returning from the river with an unknown man. So she goes ahead and tells Odysseus to follow later. More importantly, she tells him whom to approach once he reaches the royal house. Not only Alcinous. Great. The queen holds unusual respect among the Phaeacians. If Arete receives him kindly, Nausicaa suggests his chances of getting home become much better. Odysseus enters the city under Athena's protection. The goddess hides him in mist and guides him toward the palace. The Phaeacians are famous sailors, but they are also a people living at a distance from the violent world Odysseus has crossed. Their city is wealthy. Their ships are swift. Their halls are bright. Their orchards are productive. To Odysseus, the palace must feel almost unreal. He has just come from a raft torn apart by Poseidon. Now he stands among polished walls, firelight, food, and people who are not trying to kill him. He approaches Arete and Alcinous as Nausicaa advised, and the contrast with Polyphemus could hardly be stronger. The Cyclops asked who the strangers were, and then violated every expectation of hospitality. The Phaeacians allow Odysseus to eat before demanding his identity. A seat is made for him. Food is placed before him. He is treated as a guest before he is treated as a puzzle. Alcinous eventually promises that the stranger will be carried home, wherever home may be. The next day, however, the Phaeacians want to know more about the man they are helping. They hold games: running, wrestling, jumping, boxing, throwing the discus. At first, Odysseus stays apart. He has been through enough. He says he has no interest in competing. Then a young Phaeacian named Euryalus mocks him. Perhaps, he suggests, this stranger is not an athlete at all. Perhaps he is more like a trader who spends his time thinking about cargo and profit. The insult reaches something in Odysseus that exhaustion has not removed. He picks up a discus heavier than the ones the Phaeacians have been using, and throws it farther than the rest. The moment is almost playful compared with the dangers behind him, but it matters. The shipwrecked stranger has strength left. The man who crawled beneath leaves on the shore can still remind a crowd that he once stood among the warriors at Troy. Alcinous quickly smooths over the tension. The Phaeacians are proud of different skills as well. They are sailors, dancers, people of music and celebration. And this brings Demodocus forward again. The blind bard has already sung of events from the Trojan War. His song moved Odysseus in a way the others did not understand. While the hall listened to an old story, Odysseus quietly covered his face and cried. The past has become entertainment for people who were not there. For Odysseus, it is memory. Demodocus later sings another story, this time about the gods. He tells of the affair between Ares and Aphrodite and of Hephaestus catching him in a trap they cannot see until it's too late. The story adds a lighter rhythm to the feast. The gods themselves can become characters in a clever tale. Even on Olympus, desire, pride, embarrassment, and deception create their own kind of trouble. The Phaeacians dance. Gifts are prepared for the stranger. Euryalus, who insulted him earlier, offers a sword and makes peace. Odysseus could leave the matter there. Instead, he asks Demodocus for one more song. He asks about the wooden horse. The final deception at Troy. The bar begins. He sings of the Greeks appearing to leave, of the great wooden structure dragged inside the city, of the warriors hidden within it, of the decision that finally brought the long war to its end. This time Odysseus cannot hide what the song does to him. He weeps again. Alcinous notices. The king has been watching the stranger cover his face whenever Troy is mentioned. The reaction is too strong to ignore. So the question finally comes. Who are you? Why does the fall of Troy hurt you like this? And Odysseus answers. He gives his name. Then he tells the story which has followed. The Cyclones, the Lotus Eaters, Polyphemus, Ilus, the Laestrygonians, Circe, the dead, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, the cattle of Helios, and Calypso. The monsters of the Odyssey reach us largely because Odysseus tells them here, in this hall, the people who have agreed to send him home. That structure matters. He is not speaking from the middle of the Cyclops' cave. He is speaking afterward. He survived long enough to turn danger into memory. And when the story is finished, the Phaeacians do something almost shockingly simple. They keep their promise. They prepare a ship. They load the gifts they have given him. Odysseus lies down, and he sleeps. After years of trying to control every sail, every plan, every conversation, and every danger, the final crossing home requires almost nothing from him. The Phaeacian sailors know the route. Their ship moves quickly through the night. Odysseus does not navigate. He does not fight. He does not trick anyone. He sleeps through his arrival. When they reach Ithaca, the sailors carry him ashore while he is still sleeping. They place the gift beside him and leave him on the island he has spent years trying to reach. The journey across the sea is over, but Poseidon has not forgotten the Phaeacians. Their people have a reputation for carrying travelers safely home, and an old warning hangs over that generosity. One day Poseidon may punish them for it. As the ship returns from delivering Odysseus, the sea god acts. Near Scheria, the vessel is fixed in place and turned to stone. The sight terrifies the people watching from shore. Alcinous remembers the warning handed down through his family. Poseidon had always resented the Phaeacians for carrying strangers safely across the sea, and one day he might punish one of their ships and even threaten their city. The king orders sacrifices to Poseidon and tells the people to stop treating the old prophecy as something distant. It is a final reminder that hospitality in the Odyssey is not always easy or safe. The Phaeacians help Odysseus because they believe helping the stranger is right, even though the sea god who oppose them may resent them for doing it. The Phaeacians understand the message. Their kindness has carried a cost. For Odysseus, however, the prophecy given earlier in the journey has now been fulfilled. He has returned late. He has returned without his crew. He has returned on another people's ship. And trouble is waiting inside his own house. When Odysseus wakes, he does not recognize Ithaca. This is one of the strangest moments in the entire homecoming. For 10 years, he has wanted one island. Now he is lying on it and thinks he may have been deceived. Athena has covered the land in mist. The familiar coastline looks unfamiliar. The harbor does not immediately answer the picture he has carried in his mind for 20 years. Odysseus wakes among the gifts of the Phaeacians and begins worrying that they may have abandoned him somewhere else. Then a young shepherd appears. At least, that is what Odysseus sees. The shepherd is Athena in disguise, and Odysseus does what Odysseus does. He lies. Before asking who the stranger is, before explaining his own situation clearly, he invents a false identity and a complicated story about how he came to be there. Athena eventually reveals herself and seems almost delighted by the reaction. Here is the man she favors. Even when speaking to the goddess who had protected him, his instinct is to hide information until he understands the situation. Athena removes the mist. The landscape becomes recognizable. Ithaca is really beneath his feet. Odysseus bends down and kisses the ground. But the emotional moment does not last long. Athena explains what has happened in the palace. The suitors have spent years consuming his estate. They compete for Penelope's hand. They eat the animals raised by his household. They drink his wine. They behave as if the absent king is no longer part of the future. Telemachus has grown into a young man inside that pressure. He has traveled to gather news of his father. Some of the suitors have even planned to kill him on his return. Odysseus cannot simply walk into the palace and announce that the king has come home. 20 years is too long. He does not know who remains loyal. He does not know how quickly the suitors could arm themselves. He does not know whether his appearance alone would convince anyone, so the return becomes another disguise. Athena alters him. His skin seems older. His hair changes. His clothes become ragged. The man who commanded warriors at Troy is made to look like a poor traveler with no protection except the hospitality of others. The disguise is practical. It is also revealing. Odysseus can now enter his own society as someone who appears powerless. People will show him who they are when they think the king cannot see them. Athena sends him first away from the palace, not to Penelope, not to the suitors, to a swineherd named Eumaeus. Eumaeus has remained loyal through the long absence. He lives outside the city, managing Odysseus's pigs and watching a household he cannot control slowly being consumed by men who do not belong there. When the disguised Odysseus approaches his hut, the dogs rush toward him. Eumaeus drives them back and protects the stranger. He does not know who the stranger is. That is exactly why the welcome matters. He offers food. He gives him a place near the fire. He speaks respectfully about the missing king. Eumaeus is not generous because he expects a reward from Odysseus. He believes Odysseus is probably dead. He is generous because a stranger has arrived and needs help. The poem has tested hospitality again and again. Here the test happens quietly, in a small hut rather than a palace. And Eumaeus passes without knowing he is being tested. Odysseus responds with another false story. He claims to be a wandering man from Crete and builds an elaborate history around himself. The details shift the attention away from his true identity while allowing him to ask questions. What is happening in the palace? Does Penelope still wait? What kind of man is Telemachus becoming? Does anyone still remember Odysseus with loyalty rather than convenience? Eumaeus answers, and during the long night, the swineherd tells a story of his own. It is one of the sections many short retellings leave out completely. Eumaeus was not born a servant on Ithaca. He was born on an island called Syri. His father, Theseus, ruled there. The land is remembered in the poem as fertile and comfortable, rich in grain, wine, cattle, and sheep. In his father's household lived a Phoenician woman who had herself been taken from her earlier home and sold. When Phoenician traders arrived at the island, she made a secret agreement with them. They promised to take her away. In return, she helped them steal valuables and brought the young Eumaeus with her, knowing that a royal child could be sold for a high price. The escape succeeded, but the woman did not survive the voyage. Eumaeus was eventually sold on Ithaca, where Laertes bought him and brought him into the household. The story changes the way we see the swineherd. He is not simply a loyal servant placed in the poem to help the hero. He has his own lost homeland, his own forced journey, his own childhood broken by the movement of ships, and yet the household that received and became the place he chose to remain loyal to. The Odyssey is full of people being carried far from where they began. Some return, some do not. By the end of the night, Odysseus knows that Eumaeus can be trusted, but he still does not reveal himself. The plan needs another person first. The son who left Ithaca as a child, too young to remember his father, is already on his way back. Telemachus, while Odysseus was trapped on Calypso's island, Telemachus began a journey of his own. Athena pushed him to leave Ithaca, not because the trip would immediately rescue his father, but because staying inside the palace had taught him how to endure the suitors without teaching him how to stand among other men as an equal. He traveled first to Pylos and then to Sparta. He spoke with Nestor. He spoke with Menelaus and Helen. He heard stories of the Greeks who returned from Troy and of those whose homecomings ended badly. Menelaus gave him the most useful news. Odysseus was still alive, but trapped on Calypso's island. That information did not solve the crisis in Ithaca, but the journey changed Telemachus. He sat among kings. He asked questions directly. He learned that the world beyond his house remembered his father, and he began returning home with a different confidence. Athena warns him that the suitors have prepared an ambush. They know the young man who left Ithaca is more dangerous than the boy they have been ignoring. If Telemachus returns safely, he becomes another obstacle between them and the household they want. The departure from Sparta gives him one more sign before he reaches the sea. Menelaus sends him away with gifts, and Helen adds a gift of her own, a finely made robe meant for the woman Telemachus may one day marry. The gesture is quiet, almost domestic, but it places Telemachus inside an adult future. He arrived searching for news as the son of a missing man. He leaves carrying objects meant for a household he may one day lead. As the horses move away, an eagle appears, carrying a goose taken from the yard. Helen reads the omen immediately. To her, the bird is an image of Odysseus himself, a powerful creature returning from elsewhere to strike inside his own land. Telemachus cannot know how close the interpretation is to becoming real. His father is already moving toward Ithaca. The palace is already approaching the final stage of its long occupation, but the sign gives the journey a new tone. Earlier, Telemachus traveled because he lacked certainty. Now he travels home surrounded by hints that the story is beginning to close. He still has no direct control over his father's return, but the world around him keeps pointing toward it. At Pylos, he does not linger long enough to repeat the ceremonies of his outward journey. He is in a hurry. He reaches the ship, prepares to depart, and continues across the water with a sense that delay itself has become dangerous. So Telemachus changes his route and approaches Ithaca carefully. Before leaving the mainland, he also takes aboard an unusual passenger, a seer named Theoclymenus. Theoclymenus is fleeing trouble of his own and asks for passage. Telemachus accepts him. As they near Ithaca, signs begin to follow the journey. A hawk appears with a dove in its claws. Theoclymenus reads the omen as a sign that the house of Odysseus will not simply disappear. Its power will return. Telemachus wants to believe him, but first he needs to reach home alive. He lands away from the suitor's expected route and sends a ship onward while he travels to the countryside. His first destination is Eumaeus' hut. Inside, the disguised Odysseus is waiting. The meeting is almost painfully ordinary at first. Telemachus sees only an old stranger being hosted by the swineherd. Odysseus sees the son he left behind as an infant. 20 years have passed between those two images. He cannot simply recognize the adult in front of him through memory. He has to understand that this is a child who grew while he was gone. Eumaeus welcomes Telemachus with affection. Then he leaves the hut to carry news of the young man's return toward the palace. Athena waits until they are alone. Then she changes Odysseus again. The signs of old age disappear. His clothes change. His posture and presence become those of the man beneath the disguise. Telemachus is frightened. The transformation is so sudden that he thinks the stranger must be a god. Odysseus tells him otherwise. He is his father. At first, Telemachus cannot accept it. He has lived most of his life with Odysseus as an absence, a name, a story, a possibility people argue about. Now, the missing man is sitting in front of him. Odysseus explains Athena's part in the disguise, and slowly the truth becomes real. Father and son embrace. They cry. The Odyssey allows a moment to breathe. Then, because both of them are living inside a dangerous house, even when they are miles from palace, emotion turns into planning. Telemachus explains the scale of the problem. The The suitors are not 2 or 3 men who can be challenged outside the gate. They are a large group with allies, servants, weapons, and families across Ithaca and nearby islands. Odysseus has returned with no army. His entire fleet disappeared years ago. So the solution cannot begin with open strength. It has to begin with information. Telemachus will go back first. Odysseus will follow later, still disguised as a beggar. The weapons normally hanging in the great hall will be moved away, so that the suitors cannot reach them easily. No one is to know the truth until loyalty has been proven. The plan is simple enough to remember, but underneath it is something new. For most of the voyage, Odysseus made decisions for a crew. Now he is planning with his son. Telemachus is no longer the infant left behind. When the ship sailed to Troy, he is becoming a partner in the return. And when the time comes, he will have to stand beside the father he spent his life waiting for. Telemachus reaches the palace first. The suitors are still there. The tables are still full. The animals of Odysseus' estate are still being killed for meals that seem to have no end. The house sounds like a place whose owner will never return. Later, Eumaeus leads a disguised Odysseus toward the city. On the road, they meet Melanthius, a goat herd who has chosen the side of the suitors. Melanthius does not see a king. He sees an old beggar, so he insults him. He mocks Eumaeus for bringing another mouth to a house already full of men who consume more than they produce. The abuse is useful. Every insult tells Odysseus something. The disguise is drawing a map of loyalty. Near the palace lies another figure from the past. Not a warrior, a dog. His name is Argos. When Odysseus left for Troy, Argos was young. The dog had been raised for hunting, strong and alert. Now 20 years have passed. Argos is old, neglected, and lying where no valued animal should be left. The household has changed while the king was gone. The servants who once cared for the dog no longer do so. The estate still exists, but the small signs of order have faded. Odysseus walks toward the palace in disguise. Argos lifts his head. The dog recognizes him. No goddess needs to remove the disguise. No scar has to be shown. No secret story has to be told. Argos sees the man he waited for. He moves his ears and tail. Odysseus cannot openly respond. He turns his face away and hides a tear. Then Argos dies. The scene is short, but it carries the weight of the whole journey. Odysseus wanted to come back to the home he remembered, but time reached Ithaca before he did. Inside the palace, the testing continues. Odysseus moves among the suitors as a beggar asking for food. Some give him something. Others react with contempt. Antinous, one of the most aggressive suitors, becomes the clearest example. He is irritated that the stranger has entered the hall at all. Their argument grows until Antinous throws a stool at him. Odysseus takes the humiliation without revealing himself. That restraint is easy to miss after so many scenes of monsters and storms. At Troy, he commanded men. In the Cyclops' cave, he risked everything to escape. Now strength means allowing an arrogant man to strike him inside his own house, because a plan is more important than pride. Another beggar is already associated with the palace. His name is Iris, a nickname connected with the work of carrying messages. He sees Odysseus as competition. The suitors encourage the two beggars to fight for entertainment. Odysseus does not want to reveal too much, but refusing could create suspicion, so he accepts. When he adjusts his ragged clothing, the people around him see that the old stranger is much stronger than they expected. The fight ends quickly. Odysseus wins without turning the moment into a massacre. The suitors laugh and return to their evening. Again, they have been shown something important and fail to understand it. Later, Penelope appears before them. Athena has made her presence even more striking, and the suitors fall back into the old competition for her attention. Penelope uses the moment intelligently. She reminds them what courtship is supposed to look like. A proper suitor brings gift to the woman he hopes to marry. He does not spend year after year consuming the wealth of her missing husband. The argument works. The suitors send for gifts, clothing, jewelry, carefully made objects meant to display wealth and status. For once, something moves in the opposite direction. Instead of only taking from the house, the men are made to give. Odysseus watches all of it. He also encounters Melantho, one of the maidservants Penelope had helped raise. Melantho has become close to Eurymachus and treats the disguised stranger with contempt. Again, Odysseus learns who people have become in his absence. By the end of the evening, he has seen more of his household than he could have learned by entering as king. The powerless disguise gives him access to the truth, and the most important conversation is still ahead. Penelope wants to speak with a stranger who claims to have news of Odysseus. Husband and wife are about to sit in the same room. Only one of them knows it. Penelope has survived a long absence differently from Odysseus. He crossed seas. She remained in one house. But staying in place did not mean living without strategy. For years, the suitors pressured her to choose another husband. The absence of Odysseus created a political problem as much as a personal one. He might be alive. He might be dead. No one could prove either answer. Meanwhile, Telemachus grew older. The estate was consumed, and powerful families expected the uncertainty to end a marriage that benefited one of them. Penelope's most famous response was a piece of weaving. She said she would choose a husband after finishing a burial shroud for Laertes, the elderly father of Odysseus. During the day, she worked at the loom. At night, she secretly undid what she had woven. The same cloth moved forward and backward for years. The trick delayed the marriage until one of the servants revealed it. There is something deeply Odyssean in the strategy. Penelope survives through timing, concealment, and control of what other people believe. Now she sits across from a man who has built his survival around the same skills. Odysseus continues the disguise. He tells another invented story about himself, carefully mixing falsehood with details that sound true because some of them are true. He claims to have encountered Odysseus in the past. Penelope does not surrender to hope immediately. She has heard stories before. Travelers know that news about a missing king can earn food and attention, so she tests the stranger story. She asks about the clothing Odysseus wore and the people around him. The disguised Odysseus answers with detail. Penelope cries. He keeps his own face controlled. The man she is mourning is sitting close enough to hear every word, but the plan is not ready. Then Penelope orders the old nurse Euryclea to wash the guest's feet. That creates a danger Odysseus cannot solve with another story. When he was young, long before Troy, Odysseus was injured while hunting a wild boar. The wound left a scar on his leg. Euryclea knows the scar. She handled him when he was young. As she washes the beggar's feet, her hand reaches the old mark. Recognition is immediate. The basin slips. The nurse understands. The stranger is Odysseus. Joy almost destroys the secret at the exact moment the secret is most important. Odysseus stops her and makes her promise not to speak. Another person in Ithaca now knows that the king is home, but Penelope still does not. The recognition pattern becomes one of the quiet structures of these final books. Telemachus knows because Athena reveals a disguise. Euryclea knows because of a scar. Argos knew without explanation. Penelope hears stories and sees a man, yet refuses to trust what she cannot prove. That caution is not a weakness. It is a result of 20 years in a world where people have reasons to lie to her. The next day brings more signs that the palace is approaching a breaking point. Odysseus has spent the night trying to control his own anger. At moments, he hears disloyal servants moving through the house and wants to act immediately. Instead, he restrains himself. Athena comes to him in the darkness and reminds him that the plan is close to completion. By morning, Odysseus asks Zeus for a sign. Thunder answers from a clear sky. Nearby, a woman working at a mill hears it and speaks almost like an accidental prophet. She wishes that the suitors will eat their final feast in the palace that day. Odysseus takes the words as another favorable omen. Then Theoclymenus, the seer who returned with Telemachus, sees something far darker. The suitors are laughing. To everyone else, the room is still a feast hall. To Theoclymenus, the atmosphere changes. He sees darkness around them. He sees signs of grief where they see celebration. He imagines the walls stained with blood, the courtyard filling with shades, the sun disappearing behind a terrible mist. He tells them plainly that disaster is close. The suitors laugh harder. They call him mad. Theoclymenus leaves. Telemachus says little. He keeps watching his father. The hall is full of people who have been given warning after warning, and interpret every warning as entertainment. Penelope then sets the final contest in motion. She will bring out the bow of Odysseus. The man who can string it and send an arrow through a line of 12 axe heads will win the contest. The absent king is about to become the standard by which every suitor is measured. And the absent king is already in the room. The bow has waited through the years as quietly as Penelope has. It belongs to Odysseus and carries the memory of a world before the Trojan War, before the ships, before the Cyclops, before the long absence turned the owner into a story. Penelope brings it into the hall. She explains the challenge. The suitors must string the bow and shoot through the arranged axe heads. For men who have spent years claiming the right to replace Odysseus, the test is painfully appropriate. They want his household. They want his wife. Now they have to handle his weapon. Telemachus sets up the axes. Then, unexpectedly, he tries the bow himself. The attempt matters because the son is being measured against the father before either of them openly stands together. Telemachus tries more than once. He comes close. On the final attempt, it appears he may be able to string it. Odysseus gives him a subtle signal to stop. Telemachus understands. The moment is not yet his. Then the suitors begin. One after another, they fail. They strain against the bow. They try warming and greasing it to make the task easier. The weapon refuses to become theirs. While the contest continues, Odysseus quietly takes Eumaeus and another loyal servant, Philoetius the cowherd, aside. He tests them with questions about the missing king. Both men reveal that their loyalty has survived the absence. Only then does Odysseus show them the scar and tell them who he is. Their reaction is immediate, but the reunion cannot become loud. There is work to do. The doors must be controlled. The bow must reach Odysseus. The women of the household must be kept away from the hall when the confrontation begins. Telemachus has already helped move the weapons that once hung within reach of the suitors. Every small preparation matters because Odysseus does not have enough men to survive a fair fight. Eventually, the disguised beggar asks for a chance to try the bow. The suitors object. To them, the request is absurd. A poor old stranger should not touch the object none of them can master. Their reaction reveals another part of the test. They assume status and ability are the same thing. The beggar looks weak. Therefore, he must be weak. Penelope is willing to let him try. The suitors resist. Telemachus finally asserts his authority inside the household and makes sure the bow is given to the stranger. Odysseus takes it in his hands. He does not rush. He examines the weapon carefully, turning it and checking it as a musician might examine an instrument that has been silent for years. The suitors watch. Some wonder whether the stranger has handled bows before. Then Odysseus strings it. Easily. The sound of the string is compared to the clear note of music. A moment earlier, the bow was a test no suitor could pass. Now, it is simply the weapon of the man it belongs to. Odysseus takes an arrow. He aims through the axes. The arrow passes cleanly through. The contest ends in silence. Telemachus moves toward his father. The disguise has almost finished its work. For days Odysseus has watched people behave as though the beggar could not matter. Now the bow has answered the question appearance could not. The king is home. The change from contest to confrontation happens almost instantly. Odysseus still has the bow. The suitors are still seated in the hall. The first arrow strikes Antinous while he is drinking. For a moment, the others do not understand what has happened. They think the beggar has made a terrible mistake. Then Odysseus tells them who he is. The room becomes a different place. The man they treated as powerless is the owner of the house. The man they assumed would never return has been listening to them, watching them, and deciding whom he can trust. Odysseus accuses them of consuming his estate, pursuing Penelope, threatening Telemachus, and behaving as if no consequence could ever reach them. Eurymachus tries to negotiate. He places much of the blame on Antinous and offers repayment. Odysseus refuses. The fight begins. For a sleep-friendly retelling, there is little value in lingering over every wound. What matters is the structure of the room and the way the preparation now pays off. Odysseus controls the bow. Telemachus stand with him. Eumaeus and Philoetius help secure the exits. The weapons that would normally be available to the suitors have been moved. But the plan is not perfect. Telemachus has left access to the storeroom unsecured. Melanthius, the disloyal goatherd who insulted Odysseus on the road, discovers the opportunity. He begins carrying weapons and armor to the suitors. Suddenly the imbalance is smaller. Odysseus notices that the men facing him are becoming armed and realizes someone is supplying them. Eumaeus and Philoetius trace the problem to Melanthius and stop him from continuing. The fight remains dangerous. Athena appears in the form of mentor. At first, she does not simply finish everything for Odysseus. She watches test courage and shifts the balance when the moment is right. The suitors throw spears. Odysseus and his allies answer. The hall that has spent years echoing with feasting is finally being reclaimed. There are also important acts of judgment inside the violence. Not everyone in the palace is treated as an enemy simply because they were present. Phemius, the bard who had sung for the suitors, begs for mercy and explains that he performed under pressure. Telemachus supports him. Phemius is spared. Medon, a herald who had not joined the worst behavior of the suitors, is also spared. The distinction matters. The final return is not meant to be random destruction. The entire disguise sequence has been about learning who chose betrayal and who endured a situation without becoming part of it. By the end, the suitors are defeated. The servants who actively betrayed the household face punishment as well. Then the hall is cleaned. The noise stops. The tables, weapons, and bodies that mark the confrontation are removed from the center of the story. The house becomes quiet enough for the next question. Odysseus has reclaimed the palace. But reclaiming a building is not the same as reclaiming a marriage. Euryclea goes to Penelope with the news. Odysseus is home. The suitors are gone. Penelope does not immediately believe her. And this final hesitation may be one of the wisest decisions anyone makes in the poem. Penelope has spent 20 years learning not to believe what she wants to believe simply because she wants it. Rumors have arrived before. Travelers have claimed to know where Odysseus was. The world around her contains gods who change appearance and humans who survive through convincing lies. So when Euryclea tells her that Odysseus is downstairs, Penelope does not run immediately toward the answer she has waited for. She goes to see. Odysseus is there. Telemachus is frustrated by his mother's caution. To him, the truth has already been proven. He has seen Athena transform his father. He has planned beside him. He has fought beside him. Penelope has not shared those experiences. She is only a man standing in front of her after 20 years. Odysseus understands her better than Telemachus does. He knows what it means to test a story. He knows what it means to distrust appearance. After he washes and Athena restores something of his familiar presence, Penelope still does not surrender question. Then she creates the final test. She tells a servant to move the marriage bed out of the bedroom and prepare it for Odysseus elsewhere. His reaction is immediate. The bed cannot simply be moved. Odysseus built it himself. At the center of the bedroom grew a living olive tree. He shaped the room around it and used a rooted trunk as part of the bed itself. To move that bed in the ordinary way would mean that someone had cut the tree or changed the structure of the room. Odysseus describes how it was made. The secret is not heroic. It has nothing to do with Troy. It is not a famous scar. It is knowledge from the private center of the marriage. That is why it works. Penelope finally knows that the man in front of her is the man who left. They embrace. The reunion closes the deepest part of the homecoming. But Homer does not end the poem here. A palace full of dead suitors creates consequences beyond the walls. Those men had fathers, brothers, and relatives. The island can still fall into another conflict. And there is one more member of the family Odysseus has not seen, Laertes, before the story returns fully to the living. However, the Odyssey briefly follows the dead. The suitors have their own final journey to make. Hermes leads the shades of the dead suitors away from Ithaca and down toward the underworld. The poem returns to a landscape Odysseus visited earlier, but this time Odysseus is not there. The newly dead arrive among the shades of the Trojan generation. Achilles is there. Ajax is there. Agamemnon is there. The dead commanders speak about the different ends of their lives. Achilles died at Troy and received the kind of funeral suited to the greatest warrior of the Greek army. Agamemnon survived Troy only to be killed after returning home. Then Agamemnon notices the large group of young men arriving together. Among them is Amphimedon, one of the suitors, a man Agamemnon had known through ties of hospitality. Agamemnon asks what happened. Amphimedon tells the story from the suitor's side. He describes Penelope's weaving trick. He describes the return of Telemachus. He describes the beggar entering the palace. He describes the bow contest and the moment the stranger revealed himself as Odysseus. The story we just watched from inside the palace is now being retold among the dead, and Agamemnon responds by thinking about Penelope. His own return from Troy ended in betrayal within his house. Odysseus' return ended with a wife who had spent 20 years resisting pressure and protecting the possibility of his homecoming. Penelope becomes, in Agamemnon's mind, the opposite of Clytemnestra. The two homecomings mirror each other again. Both men survived Troy. Only one returned to a household still capable of receiving him. Back in the world of the living, Odysseus goes to see his father. Laertes has withdrawn from the palace and spends much of his time working on the land. Age and grief have changed him. When Odysseus sees him in the orchard, worn down and alone, the returning son begins to cry. And then, in a choice that feels almost absurd after everything that has happened, Odysseus decides to test him too. He does not immediately say, "Father, I am home." He invents another identity. He claims to be a traveler who once hosted Odysseus years ago. The false story hurts Laertes deeply. The old man believes he is hearing one more uncertain report about the son he has lost. Odysseus cannot continue. He reveals himself. Laertes asks for proof. Odysseus shows the scar from the boar hunt. Then he gives evidence more intimate than the scar. He remembers the orchard. As a boy, he followed Laertes among the trees and asked what would one day belong to him. His father named the pear trees, apple trees, fig trees, and rows of vines. Odysseus remembers those gifts. The land itself becomes a form of recognition. Penelope knew him through the bed built around a living tree. Laertes knows him through memories of trees growing outside the house. The return keeps narrowing from famous stories to shared details. Laertes accepts him. For a short time, 3 generations of the family are finally alive on the same island together. Laertes, Odysseus, and Telemachus. But news of the suitors' deaths is spreading. The families of the dead gather in Ithaca. From their perspective, the situation is not simple. A man disappeared for 20 years. Now he has returned and killed many of the leading young men of the islands. Some older voices urge caution. Haliartus reminds the crowd that warnings have been given before and that the suitors created much of the disaster through their own behavior. But grief does not always listen to warnings. Eupaeus, the father of Antinous, pushes for revenge. The armed group moves toward Odysseus and his family. For one last time, the poem seems ready to become another battle. Odysseus, Telemachus, and their allies prepare. Laertes, old as he is, stand with them. Athena gives him strength, and in the brief clash he strikes Eupaeus. Odysseus and Telemachus move forward. Then the gods stop the pattern before it can grow. Zeus supports peace. Athena commands both sides to end the fighting. Weapons are lowered. The cycle breaks. This is where Homer's Odyssey ends. Not with another monster. Not with another ship disappearing over the horizon. Not even with Odysseus winning one more battle. It ends when the man who spent years trying to return finally has a home that can remain a home. The second half of the Odyssey can feel slower than the famous island adventures. That is deliberate. The Cyclops has one eye and a cave full of danger. Silhouettes above a narrow strait. The sirens sing from a deadly shore. Those scenes are easy to picture. Home is harder. Once Odysseus reaches Ithaca, there is no single creature to defeat. The problem is information. Who is loyal? Who has changed? Who recognizes him? Who deserves trust? What does Penelope believe? What does Telemachus become? What happens after the suitors are gone? This is why disguise takes so much space in the final books. Odysseus has spent years entering places where he is unknown. Now, he enters the one place where he should be known and chooses not to be recognized. The disguise turns Ithaca into one final strange island. Eumaeus welcomes a powerless stranger. Melanthius insults him. Argos recognizes him. Antinous attacks him. Eurycleia recognizes a scar. Penelope listens but does not trust quickly. Each encounter answers a different question about what survived the 20 years. The famous word connected with Odysseus is métis, practical intelligence, cunning, the ability to find a path through a situation that stronger people may not see. But the last part of the poem suggests that intelligence is not only invention, it is patience. Odysseus knows how to make a plan. He also has to learn when not to reveal himself. He has to accept insults he could easily answer. He has to let people speak long enough to show what they really think. The contrast with the Cyclops is important. After escaping Polyphemus, Odysseus had already won. All he needed to do was leave. Instead, he shouted his name across the water. Pride turned successful escape into a long curse. In Ithaca, the same man does the opposite. He knows his name is powerful, so he hides it until the correct moment. The journey has not made him a completely different person, but has given him 20 years of reasons to understand the value of timing. Penelope mirrors that intelligence from the other side of the marriage. Her loom creates time. Her questions test stories. Her final trick with the bed proves identity through knowledge only the real Odysseus should possess. The reunion works because both of them refuse to accept appearances too easily. For a story filled with gods changing shape, that caution is sensible. And for a story about returning after long absence, it is emotionally necessary. A homecoming cannot be completed by geography alone. Odysseus reaches Ithaca before he reaches Penelope. He reaches Penelope before he reaches peace. The destination has several layers. First the island, then the house, then the family, then the future. Only when all four are restored can a long voyage finally stop. The Odyssey has survived for thousands of years partly because its images are so easy to remember. A one-eyed giant, a bag holding the winds, a woman on an island who transforms men, a journey among the dead, sirens singing from the shore, a monster on one side of the water and a whirlpool on the other, a bow no one else can string. These images are strong enough to survive even when people forget how the episodes connect. But spectacle alone does not explain the poem's endurance. Under the Monsters is a story built from ordinary pressure stretched to extraordinary scale. The desire to go home. The fear that home may change while you are away. The possibility that you may change too much to fit the life you remember. The tension between cleverness and pride. The question of how strangers should be treated when no one knows what power they may carry. The problem of identity after long absence. Odysseus survives because he can change roles. At different points he is a king, warrior, sailor, storyteller, beggar, liar, husband, father, and son. The same flexibility that makes him difficult to defeat also makes him difficult to define. He is rarely only one thing. That is why recognition matters so much at the end. Argos recognizes him without explanation. Eurycleia recognizes a scar. Telemachus needs Athena and his father's words. Laertes receives a scar and memories of the orchard. Penelope requires the secret to the marriage bed. Each person knows Odysseus through something different. The famous hero of Troy becomes personal again, one relationship at a time. Hospitality forms another quiet thread through the entire poem. The Cyclops is a monster's host. He takes strangers who enter his home and turns the rules of welcome into horror. The suitors are monstrous guests. They enter another man's house and consume it from within. Eumaeus does the opposite. He receives a stranger who appears to have nothing to offer him and gives him food and shelter anyway. The Phaeacians feed Odysseus before demanding his history and carry him home after hearing it. The poem repeatedly asks how people behave when someone vulnerable appears at the door. That question is still understandable without believing in Poseidon or Cyclopes. So is the role of time. The phrase 10-year journey can make the Odyssey sound like 10 years of constant movement. It is not. Large parts of the decade are delays. A year with Circe, years with Calypso, long stretches where nothing can be solved by strength because the real problem is waiting. The monsters are dramatic, but the invisible force shaping the whole story is time. Telemachus grows from infant to adult. Laertes grows old. Argos waits until his body cannot wait any longer. Penelope builds strategies designed not to win immediately, but to keep the future open. Odysseus returns to a home that continued existing without him. That may be the most human part of the myth. We often imagine return as movement backward. Go back to the place you knew. See the people you remember.